There is something deeply disturbing about the way Silo can take the most ordinary object imaginable and make it feel like a threat. A door, a camera, a cafeteria meal, a medical checkup. And now, in Season 3, Episode 2, the show has somehow turned a barrel labeled Vitamin D Plus into one of the most terrifying images of the entire season. Because at first, that label sounds harmless. It sounds responsible. It sounds like something a community living underground would obviously need. These people have no sun. They have no sky. They have no real outdoor life. So of course they would need vitamin D. That is exactly why the lie works. But by the end of the episode, those barrels are not just supplies being moved through the silo. They look like the beginning of a quiet attack. Not an attack with guns, not an attack with raiders, not even an attack with the safeguard. This is something colder than that. It is an attack on memory, on identity, on history, and maybe on the entire population of Silo 18. And if you're obsessed with uncovering the secrets of the silo, the truth behind the founders, the outside world, and every little clue they hide in plain sight, make sure you like, subscribe, and drop your theory in the comments. I make these breakdowns all by myself, deep in the mechanical level with zero help from judicial. And most importantly, subscribe if you don't want to be sent out to clean. I'm joking, mostly. So before we get into what vitamin D plus probably is, let's quickly recap what the episode is telling us. Camille believes she has finally stabilized Juliet. From the outside, it looks like the crisis is being managed. Juliet is mayor, the silo is calmer than it was. People are no longer openly spiraling into civil war. Camille thinks the story they built around Juliet's return is holding, but when she goes back to the vault and speaks with the algorithm, the conversation makes it very clear that the system is not relieved. The system is calculating. And that is the first major clue. The algorithm does not look at Juliet like a person. It looks at her like a variable. It has a blue line and a red line. The blue line represents the calming value of Juliet being alive and serving as mayor. The red line represents the danger she becomes if the memory protocol fails. In plain language, Juliet is useful as long as she keeps the silo peaceful and forgets the truth. But the moment she remembers too much, she becomes more dangerous alive than dead. That is such a chilling idea, because Juliet has always been dangerous to the people in power, but usually because of what she does. She fixes things, she breaks systems, she asks questions, she climbs where nobody else would climb, she survives what nobody else survives. But now, the danger is not just her actions, it is her memory. The thing the system fears most is not Juliet holding a weapon, it is Juliet remembering who she is. And then comes the line that changes the whole episode. The algorithm says they can only hope the vitamin compound reaches the water supply before removing Juliet becomes necessary. That is the moment the show stops being about one woman being drugged and becomes about an entire society being prepared for a reset. Because the name Vitamin D Plus is almost certainly a cover. It is too perfect. It is the kind of label that would make nobody ask questions. In a silo, vitamin D would sound completely normal. Nobody living underground would find it strange if leadership announced a health supplement program. Nobody would panic if medical supplies were being moved through the central staircase. In fact, a lot of residents might even feel reassured. They might think the system is taking care of them. They might think this is one of those boring but necessary maintenance routines that keeps the silo alive. But that is exactly how Silo hides horror in plain sight. The scariest thing about this world is not always that people are lied to, it is that the lies are built into ordinary life so deeply that they become invisible. The cafeteria is not just a cafeteria. The screens are not just screens. The pact is not just law. And vitamin D plus is probably not just a supplement. The biggest clue comes from what has already been happening to Juliet. She's being given something that affects her memory. Camille is frustrated because Juliet is not forgetting fast enough. The algorithm responds by talking about centuries of data. It says the protocol works most of the time when implemented correctly. Then it mentions something even more important. Full resets. 6 silos have undergone full resets, including Silo 18 itself, about 140 years ago. That one detail is massive. It means the system has done this before, not just to one person, not just to a mayor or a sheriff or a rebel. A full reset means a large-scale wipe of memory, history, or social awareness. It suggests that when a silo becomes too unstable, when too many people know too much, or when rebellion becomes too hard to contain, the system does not simply punish a few leaders, it rewrites the population. And if Silo 18 already went through this 140 years ago, it explains a lot about why the world inside the silo feels so controlled. People do not just lack information because books were banned. They lack information because their society may have been chemically edited. Their historical memory may not be natural. Their ignorance may have been manufactured over generations, with each reset cutting away whatever truth survived from the last crisis. That is why the barrels matter. They are not just a twist, they are the physical form of the system's final solution. If Juliet is the spark that might wake people up, then vitamin D+ is the rain meant to put that spark out before it becomes a fire. And the water supply detail makes it even more horrifying. Water is universal. Everyone needs it. You cannot meaningfully opt out of it. You can refuse a pill if you know it is a pill. You can pretend to swallow something. You can avoid a doctor. But once something is introduced into the water supply, consent disappears. The entire silo becomes a target. Children, workers, mechanical, judicial, supply, the mids, the down deep. Everyone drinks. Everyone forgets. This is where the emotional horror of this episode really lands. Because if vitamin D+ is a mass memory suppressant, the residents of Silo 18 may not even realize they are being conquered. They may wake up one day slightly confused, slightly calmer, less angry, less certain of what they were fighting about. The rebellion may not end with executions. It may end with people forgetting why they were willing to die in the first place. Think about what that means for mechanical. These people fought because they believed the truth had been buried. They saw Juliet as proof that the official story was wrong. They lost people. They risked everything. They stood against Bernard, judicial, and the old order because they had finally reached the point where fear was no longer stronger than truth. But if the water is drugged, that courage can be softened. Not erased in one dramatic instant maybe, but blurred, turned into doubt, turned into exhaustion, turned into that awful feeling of, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. And that is more terrifying than a normal dictatorship. A normal dictatorship tells you not to speak. This system makes you forget what you wanted to say. Juliet's role in all this is especially tragic because the algorithm understands her value better than almost anyone else. It knows the silo needs her. Her survival calmed people down. Her return gave them something to believe in. Making her mayor was not just a political move, it was emotional engineering. Juliet became a symbol the system could use. The same woman who once threatened the lie is now being used to preserve it. But the problem is Juliet is still Juliet. Even with her memories damaged, something inside her keeps pushing back. She has flashes, she has instincts, she senses when something does not fit. And that is why the red line exists. The algorithm is basically saying she is useful until she remembers enough to become herself again. That is also why they cannot simply kill her, at least not yet. If Juliet suddenly dies, the silo may explode. People already see her as a miracle. She went outside, she came back, she survived the impossible. If leadership removes her too quickly, she becomes a martyr, and martyrs are dangerous because they do not need to speak anymore. Their death speaks for them. So the system needs a softer solution. Keep Juliet alive long enough to calm everyone down. Drug her enough to keep her from exposing the truth. And if the wider population begins to become unstable, introduce the compound into the water supply. That way the silo does not have to be crushed. It can be pacified. The name vitamin D+ also tells us something about the psychology of control in this show. The D gives a lie credibility. The plus sign makes it sound improved, upgraded, maybe even medically advanced. It's branding. It's propaganda in product form. Nobody calls a mind control compound a memory suppressant. You call it a vitamin. You call it wellness. You call it prevention. You make the cage look like healthcare. And this connects to one of Silo's biggest themes. Control works best when people participate in it without realizing it. The residents maintain the systems that imprison them. They repeat the slogans. They obey the pact. They report forbidden behavior. They trust departments whose real purpose they don't understand. Now, if they drink this compound, they may literally help erase themselves while believing they are being protected. The question now is how complete the reset will be. Will it erase specific memories? Will it weaken emotional intensity? Will it make people more suggestible? Or will it create a broader fog that allows leadership to rewrite the last few months of history? Because the show may not be saying everyone will forget everything. That might be too obvious. The more dangerous version is selective forgetting. People still know their names, they still know their jobs, they still know where they live, but the sharp edges are gone, the anger is gone, the connections are gone, the proof becomes fuzzy. That would allow Camille, Sims, and the algorithm to rebuild the narrative. Juliet did not expose the system, she saved it. Bernard was not murdered, he died in chaos. The other silos are not real or not relevant or too dangerous to discuss. The rebellion was a misunderstanding. The pact must be restored for everyone's safety, and anyone who still remembers differently becomes the unstable one. That last part is important because after a reset, truth itself becomes isolating. Imagine being one of the few people who remembers what really happened while everyone around you has been chemically convinced to move on. You would look insane. You would sound dangerous. You would become easier to dismiss, easier to arrest, easier to disappear. And that may be where Juliet's arc is heading. She may not just have to remember the truth, she may have to convince a population that has been engineered to forget it. That is why the ending shot of the barrels is so ominous. It is not loud, it is not explosive. It is just workers pushing supplies up the stairs. But beneath that quiet image is the possibility that Silo 18 is about to lose the one thing it has only just begun to recover, its collective memory. The people were finally starting to understand that their world was built on lies. Now the system is preparing to make those lies feel natural again. And Camille's part in this makes the whole thing even more unsettling. She may not see herself as evil. That is what makes her dangerous. She probably believes she is preventing chaos. She probably believes the silo cannot survive if people know too much. She may tell herself that Juliet's pain is unfortunate but necessary, that the water compound is extreme but justified, that a controlled population is better than a dead one. But Silo keeps asking the same brutal question. How much of your humanity can you sacrifice in the name of survival before survival becomes meaningless? If the price of keeping people alive is stealing their minds, their memories, and their right to know the truth, then what exactly is being preserved? The vitamin D+ reveal is scary because it suggests the system has moved beyond managing Juliet. Juliet was only the first test. The real target is the silo itself. And if those barrels reach the water supply before Juliet fully wakes up, then Season 3 may not be building toward a simple rebellion. It may be building toward a race against forgetting. Because once the water changes, the fight changes. Juliet will not just be fighting Camille. She will not just be fighting Sims. She will not even just be fighting the algorithm. She will be fighting time, chemistry, propaganda, and the terrifying possibility that the people she is trying to save may soon forget they ever needed saving. So yes, vitamin D+ may sound harmless. It may look like another ordinary piece of silo maintenance, but in reality, it could be the most dangerous weapon Silo 18 has ever seen. Not because it kills the body, but because it kills the past. And in a world where the past is the only way to understand the prison, forgetting may be worse than death.